Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah. Great. All right. Well, hi everyone. Thank you for joining and welcome to the Dapr community call for December 14th, 2021. My name is Nick Greenfield and I am a docs maintainer on the Dapr project, and I'll be the host for today's call. And to take a look at today's agenda, we have 3 topics that we'll be covering. The first topic will be a quick one. It's about the new DCO requirement that I'm sure many of you have already seen on incoming contributions. Then we'll take a look at how you can run Dapr in a Knative environment. And then we'll wrap things up with a first look at the new Dart-SDK that has been accepted into the Dapr project. And so as always, everyone in the call is muted by default, except for the presenters. So if you do have any questions at any point throughout today's call, feel free to leave those questions in the chat, and we'll try to leave time in between the sessions to address those questions, or at the very end if there's time during the open discussion. And so with that, I think we can get started with the first topic, which I actually will be covering today, which is the Developer's Certificate of Origin, signing your work. So I'm going to switch over to an example of just an open PR in the docs repo that I was taking a look at this morning. And you can see that we now have these new checks in every PR, part of our build process, for DCO, which stands for Developer Certificate of Origin. And really what this means is that as part of the onboarding to CNCF, there's this requirement that all incoming contributions, specifically every commit that is being accepted into the Dapr project, needs to be signed by the contributor, which really says, that contributor certifies that they wrote this code and they have the rights to submit this code to the project. And by signing your commit, you're basically agreeing and accepting all of these terms here, these conditions. And so this is right now posted live on our docs website if you actually want to dive in further and read what this is. But really, there's some useful tools out there for signing your commits, especially if you're using Git. When you make a commit, you can add a -s, and by default, that will add the signed off by whoever the contributor is into the commit. And that's all that check is looking for when you submit your PRs. Again, if we have instructions here. If you've already made commits that are not signed, how do you go back and sign those commits? So here's that guidance here. So just a heads up that all incoming contributions from here on out are going to need, no matter what the repo is, will need to meet this requirement. So sign your commits. That's it. So with that, we'll hand it off to Stefan, who will talk about how to run Dapr in a Knative environment.
Thanks, Nick. So let me share my screen. Okay. Do you see the presentation?
Yep, you can see it.
Okay, so I have a real quick presentation. It will take like 3 slides. First one, you can see it. So my name is Stefan. I'm a software engineer. And today I want to tell you regarding how you can use Dapr and Knative together to get the benefits from both. So before we get started, what is Knative? Knative is a Kubernetes-based platform for running serverless workloads. It consists of 2 parts: serving, which is exactly used to run the workloads and providing the capabilities of scaling to 0, and eventing, which provides you with different kinds of tools to create the event-based architecture. Overall, both parts are used and providing you with tools in order to run your workloads only at the point where there is some request they need to process. If you don't have any requests that you need to process, any data or something like that, then your workload is scaled to 0 and you don't use resources. So here's the first, I will show you the 2 demos. One is already in the samples repository of Dapr. This is the distributed calculator using Knative serving. Basically, this is the same distributed calculator quick start, but the React frontend is served by Knative serving, and when there is no request to the frontend, the pod is scaled to 0, so it's not up and running. And the second one is Dapr bindings plus Knative serving and eventing. It's a bit more complex and advanced. I've used the React form from the Dapr quick start of PubSub. I've redone it a little bit to use not PubSub but bindings, and then we will have Kafka to have topics with events, and each we will have three different pods which will run depending on at which topic event will arrive. So let me switch to the console. So I have a clean cluster right now with nothing, just initially. So let's start with installing Kafka, because it takes more time than anything else. So while it will be in the provisioning the cluster for us, I will install everything else. So for Kafka, I'm using Streamzy project, which is a second. Yeah. Then we need to wait until the pod is up and running. So the cluster, Streamzy cluster operator, when it will be running, I will create the new cluster. While it's up and let's initialize also Dapr. Yeah, so Dapr is initialized. We have this, and then I'm just applying the YAML file to create a single persistent single Kafka cluster. So it's created. It takes time to install. For the first example, this one, I need also to install Redis. So let's do that. So now let's see the full list of pods. Okay, so Redis is also in the creating status. We see that Dapr is initialized. Kafka is creating also. So next one, what we need is to install actually the serving. First, I will install the serving CRDs. So you can install Knative using the YAML files or operator. YAML files is, for me, better because I clearly have control over what I'm actually creating and installing. So you need to install two YAML files. One is for CRD, and then second one is for core to install all of the things necessary for that. And then we also need to install networking layer. Knative supports different networking layers like Ambassador, Istio, and they at some point also created this very slim networking courier, which is basically just a gateway and it serves like an ingress and nothing more. Then after the courier is installed, we need to update the configuration of Knative serving, saying that the ingress will be the courier. Now let's take a look at what we have. So Redis is continued creating, the same for Kafka. Event serving is up and running, and also courier is also up and running. So what we need is the IP address of the external IP address. I will make a note that's later reasons. One of the things which is very awesome regarding Knative that is provide you with the capability, Knative server, that you can configure domain name and it will provision your pods already with within this domain name. Well, it's easy right away to go and provision your workloads. So I'm using this domain name and then the IP address, this one, I will just take a note at my host file to make sure that the domain names which will be created are pointed to this IP address. So now let's look. Okay, so Redis is up and running. That's the basic requirement. Dapr and Redis and Knative server is the minimum requirements which we need for first sample. Okay. So let's take a look. In the default namespace, we have the calculator. It's creating, and as you can see, the calculator front end is creating with 3 containers. That's the front end application, Dapr, and a container from Knative in order to have control over this and get some metrics and other stuff. And if we take a look at the Knative services, we can see that we have the URL already created for us, and there is a revision and ready is true. When ready is true, we can go to the here it is, and let's do some calculations. It's up and running and working. And right now, let's close it. Let's take a look at the pods. We see that it's right now up and running. When there will be no traffic for this, it will be scaled down to 0. We will not see it. And it's take by default, the timeout is 1 minute. After that, the pod will be terminated. Yeah. While we're waiting for that, let's just install other things which we need for the second example. And we will need to install Knative eventing and one of the extension for Kafka to use that. So first I will install the same process is to install first the CRDs. And then the core. Okay, and I also need to install the Kafka extension for using the one of the objects, which will be used in order to connect Dapr and Knative together. Okay, so everything is installed right now. Let's take a look at the pods. As you can see, we don't have any calculator. And if I will do it like that, so you will be able to see it. As you can see, when I go to the calculator front end, the pod is scaled up. It takes usually a couple seconds to make it up and running. It depends on the application also itself, how fast it is. So we need to wait until it will be in the running state. Okay. It's interesting why it takes so long. Okay, it's running. Okay. Yeah. So same works. The calculator, and it's up and in the running state. All right. So now let's. So this is this sample, very basic one, just using Knative server. But when I've done this sample, I thought that it's not very, it's useful. It's showing the capabilities of Knative serving, but if we take a look at the architecture of the whole application, these 4 pods are still up and running, nevertheless, if there is some traffic or not. So the next sample, we will see that the front end and back end will go also be scaled to 0. So right now, what we will have the React form, which will be served by Knative serving. We have Kafka already created. We will have Kafka source, that's the extension which monitors the topics of Kafka. If there is some event, it takes this event and sends it to the destination which we configured. In my case, the destination would be another Knative server, which will take and will be scaled up from 0 to 1 when there will be some event. So let's get back here and take a look. As you can see, by the way, that there is no traffic, so the front end was just scaled up. Now let's go to here. So we have Kafka, serving is deployed, everything is configured, event, and also we configured. So now I have 2 folders. In the Knative folder, I have 3 for each of the, I have 3 topics, 3 sources, and 3 services. So let's just apply that. Now, in the Dapr, I have 3 bindings. This is the component of Dapr to configure where to actually publish a new event. And also I have the React form. The React form is a Knative server. So it takes all of the things regarding how to deploy, and you don't need to create separate YAML files for deployment, for service, etc. So it creates it by himself and also manages by himself. And also, in order to initialize Dapr inside the pod, I'm just adding the same annotation which you usually add to the deployment, and it will be added there. Let's also apply that. Okay. So let's take a look. I have right now 5 Knative services. One is the calculator, 3 for my applications in the backend applications which will receive events, and React form which will be used like a generator of events. I also have three topics that these are three bindings in order to make a connection from Dapr to appropriate topic in Kafka. And if we take a look at the pods, we have three Kafka sources. This is the extension from Knative and Kafka, which monitors the topics inside Kafka. If there is an event, it takes this event. Let me show the source, for example. So the configuration is very straightforward. I just need to provide the connection to Kafka, say which exactly topic I need to monitor, and then say to what will be the destination. Destination can be the Knative server. It can be just a service of the Kubernetes itself. It depends. And now let's take this one and do the same thing. So I'm going to the React form. This is, as I said, a form which is used in the PubSub quick start. I've just make changes to it in order to use the binding instead of PubSub. So I have three topics in here. We can see that it's up and running right now. The same I can send message to when I send message to A. The backend event display A is up and running. Then I'm send message to B. B is up and running, and the same goes for C. C is also up and running. If we now go to the logs, the application is very easy. It takes event and then just show it to the in the log. We see that there is test A. Same goes for B. And same goes for C. So each backend application received the event from topic, which I've sent there into Kafka. And they are up and running. As they are hosted by the Knative server, when there will be no workload for them, they will be just terminated. As we can see, they already is more than 1 minute without any workload, so they are terminated, and they will be, as well as the React form, there will be no up and running for them. So these are the capabilities which you can get from Knative. You can use serving to scale down to 0, and also they provide capabilities in order to control your deployment and using revisions and configurations. And also with eventing, eventing is like a constructor with different tools. You install only what you need, and then they provide you with different tools to create the event-based architecture, event-driven architecture. So that's all what I wanted to show you today.
Awesome. Thanks for showing that. Any questions regarding Dapr and working with Knative? Not seeing any in the chat just yet. But we can always come back. So, all right, moving on to the next topic, taking a look at the new Dart SDK that was recently accepted into the Dapr project. Abhilash, do you want to share your screen?
Yep. So is it visible now, the presentation?
Yep, we can see it.
Yeah, hi everybody. This is Abhilash from Heidelberg now. So today I would like to give a short preview on current status of the Dart-SDK for Dapr. And so first of all, the first important question would be like why we need another SDK here, and we have a lot of SDKs already. The reason I personally believe is that Dart has recently become famous due to the modern UI frameworks such as Flutter, and already it was there for Angular Dart as well. And due to the let's say like promise given by Flutter, Dart is also gaining some popularity, and to some extent it's easy. It's also easy to learn and provide sound null safety. That means your whatever microservices that you're developing is null safe. And it also has a Dart2JS compiler just in case if I think the containers doesn't have any, or let's say, for example, app containers doesn't have any Dart-based containers in GCP. So that is also possible, just like how JavaScript was started as a UI language or like front-end scripting language, then overall it later it took into the backend as well. So I have a feeling that also could go into that direction. And so this would allow like using Flutter, you could already develop sort of both desktop, mobile and web apps. And maybe in future, we could also have a Dapperized microservices using Dart. And that is a couple of reasons that I thought like I should start working on this SDK. And I'm personally have experience in Flutter and Dart, but the rest of the things are relatively new to me. So I'm still learning a lot of things here. So first of all, how currently I kept the SDK into 4 different small packages. So Dapr client would allow sort of like client applications to communicate with your Dapr sidecar. And Dapr server is basically like the API that provides or enables you to write my services using Dapr or Dapperized services such as like subscriber or method invoking and bindings or like input bindings. And what Dapr common does is like sort of abstracts certain elements into this separate package, especially because Dart doesn't have any data class. So we have to rely on code generation, and whatever that generated code I have kept in Dapr common so that it could be shared across both these client and server packages. And Dapr Proto is simply a package which only sort of creates the stubs from the Dapr protobufs. And this would allow sort of, I don't know, maybe to provide like if there is a future version 2 for Dapr, then we could actually allow this package alone to expose the separate versions, and to keep the dependencies clear, it would be nice. So that's why I went in that direction. And this sort of segregation is currently common in the Flutter community. So I followed that notion. And that's how the current organization is. Some basic information about how the dev environment can be set up is like, I saw that Dapr recommends dev container based setup. So I went with that. I saw that JS SDK and even many other SDKs of, I mean, everything Python SDK also follows the same ideology. And so I went ahead and created those setup, and now Dart-SDK is compatible with CodeSpace and also VS Code remote container. And I also used a little bit of Docker Compose so that all the containers are within the network and not in the local network of the developer. And local setup is also possible because that's how I started it, but I wouldn't recommend it. But I will definitely document that steps as well into the documentation part. Currently, it supports Dart version 2.14 with but it was like 2 days ago, there was a new release for 2.15. But I also would like to support 2.12, which is when the null safety was introduced in Dart. And so at least I would like to support a minimum version of 2.12. And the repository itself is structured into a monorepo where all the packages are inside one repository. And I'm already using GitHub Actions to do continuous integration like testing, and further the publishing and deployment is not yet set up, but definitely it would be set up like once the package is stable or the code is stable. And to some extent code coverage is also ready, and but I have to make sure that everything is working fine there. So that's about the development environment. And currently the SDK sort of mimics the JS SDK API surface. If you see, like what I did is like to some extent I understand the JavaScript better than Go. So I went through how JS SDK is organized, and I saw how the interface is like designed. So I followed the exact same principle, and sort of it's basically to some extent like one-to-one reference, and that's how I initiated this SDK. But there are still some differences because Dart doesn't support any unions. So there would be like certain differences in the, for example, like the feature would respond with a concrete instance than a dynamic object, something like that. And like I said, the currently Dapr client, the separate package supports secret management, service information, service invocation, state management, output bindings. Publish was working until last week, but I started to try to introduce the cloud event envelope for the subscriber part, but then now it stopped working, let's say. So that's still a work in progress. It doesn't mean everything is complete here, but whatever JS SDK provides, it's almost close to that, because I've written the exact same test cases, and I also adopted some tests from other SDKs. And for the Dapr server side, currently, exactly like I've been discussing with Phil about the subscribe part and the cloud event enveloping part. So I'm still working on it. Service invocation and input bindings are also working. I did have some issues with input bindings, but it turned out to be some configuration issue. But I still need to do a couple more testing with different components. Say, like I've tested it with RabbitMQ, but I think I started it with Mosquito. It didn't work fine for me, so I have to test it thoroughly. Currently, it also provides ways to add additional endpoints, like HTTP endpoints if you want. In case of HTTP servers, you can add additional endpoints, just like how I saw that sort of implementation in Go. So I sort of adopted that also into this one. And currently there is the method, the testing just follows an end-to-end testing. There is no specific unit testing right now. So I've followed how JS SDK has approached it, and I've written both for both protocols, HTTP and gRPC. I forgot to mention that. If you see, both Dapr client and Dapr server enables you to communicate using both HTTP and gRPC protocol. And yeah, additionally, there are some tests that I need to borrow from Go SDK and Python SDK so that there's good compatibility. And this was one of the doubt I had, like in multiple lists, when services written in different SDKs communicate, we need to do that some sort of testing so that the APIs are properly working across SDKs. I think one of the easiest way would be to work with I think the workshop that we had during the DapperCon. Maybe if I could recreate it using Dart, then that would be like a full-fledged demo for the Dart-SDK. But it still has to come over. I believe there is no actors in that because I haven't worked on actors API here. And what are the to-dos for me? The first and foremost thing would be to set up the documentation part. I already did it. Okay, I shouldn't say like completed it, but I understood how the Dapr docs needs to be set up. So I kind of forked the Dapr docs repository and tried to create the Dapr docs directory into my SDK, and now the links are rendering. So that is still work in progress. Also add API documentation, which would be automatically deployed in the Dart's package manager, which doesn't have to be given here. And first and foremost, another important thing is like adding examples for each building block. While the test cases show like all different possibilities, it still makes sense to give proper examples. So I need to do different examples for each building block, how other SDKs have done it. And one of the most important thing I think is the exception and error handling, which right now is like there is no custom exceptions. It would just throw some exceptions, but I'm already facing some issue with that. So I think that this is sort of like a priority. You could see like the order of things that I want to work on like further during the period. Then add some unit tests using Nox package. This is like, I think what I noticed is like all the SDKs use some sort of a fake server to do the test for the clients. I want to do that as well for the, that's what I call as a unit test, because right now it's end-to-end test, meaning it's real Dapr application running and testing, which is not suitable for Google, not Google, GitHub Actions, because the app doesn't know whether the sub process is failing or not. So that was an issue. I've been already discussing about that with Xavier for the JS SDK. And I saw there is a serialization part. I haven't gone through it completely, but I saw that there is a serialization topic showing up in Java SDK. I have to understand it exactly how it is and then see if I could work on it. Even before going into the actors part, the actors API is not yet set up. I haven't started it at all. So maybe in Q1 of 2022, maybe I'll start working on that. And by end of it, there should be some rough implementation for that. And I'm also thinking about another package type of Flutter where we could inject the clients into the Flutter widgets. This is something that I had thought about. Initially, I wanted it, but then I stopped like, okay, it's not necessary, because then I can focus only on a Dart API rather than bringing additional Flutter dependency to the SDK, but maybe a separate conversation or a project for that. That's what I have so far. And let's see the demo time. May the demo gods bless me. And yeah, I'll just, okay, this didn't work. So even before, before jumping into the examples, I will just show how I organized the code. Maybe I could also get some feedbacks from existing maintainers, then just to get a clarity. So like I said, it's completely based on it's a dev container based setup. So what I've done is like whatever components or whatever containers that I need, additionally, I'm installing it here. Initially, I wanted to do the Dapr placement services as well as the, say, for example, even the Redis, so that I could control the name of the container. But then I sort of like move that logic and then renaming part, I'm doing it in the dev container JSON. So now everything runs under one network, so that this doesn't disturb the local Dapr containers that is already running. I don't know, I felt that could be a necessary step when starting a development environment. So the same setup could run on your local Docker. If you have Docker Windows or Docker Desktop, it should do the same thing. And this Docker file is sort of nearly a copy of a JS SDK Docker file. And I'm adding some additional Dart related installation steps here. And yeah, that's more or less what I've done here. And this is a separate configuration that I've currently used. Currently, I'm using it in for GitHub Actions. That's a different issue. So that's how the dev container is set up. And I'm using something called a Melos, which is a monorepo manager for Dart or Flutter, just like I think it's NXRC or Turbo Repo, I think, in JS field. So all the packages are kept inside a folder, and you can see like different packages are being created here and the different tests and libraries. And all the common files, like generated files, are kept here. And especially the mocks, the models, and some common enums that I need across both the packages. And also some configuration, such as like constants that need to be used by the Dapr server. So as a start, I would go with Dapr client because it's working right now. So for an example, I'll start with the secrets management. So what we have here is a component which is having a local secrets in a JSON file, and a component is configured to direct to that local JSON file. And in this, what we are doing here is like, so I'm exposing a Dapr client object where you could pass like, for example, the default protocol is like HTTP. So whenever the application runs, it communicates with the sidecar using a HTTP protocol. And this is the port that the sidecar is running. And then it almost exposes an API that is similar to JavaScript, where you have a Dapr client instance. And then you can access different building blocks from that, say binding, or like pub/sub or invoker or secret. So different building blocks are accessible over a different instance. And so, for example, here we are accessing a secret store named secret local and using the key. And if I run this, I should see that my secret is that I'm Batman from the demo example from the documentation. Oh, sorry. Yeah, and so the same thing we can do, like bulk secret fetch here. If you see, it's the same thing. I've exposed another method to fetch the same thing. Now all the secrets in this will be fetched and printed. And if you notice, the secrets are encoded into something called a secret response. This is to have a unified API like across HTTP and gRPC. I think that would that also eases the testing part. So that's what I wrote like that. And yeah, so that's a little bit about secret management. And if you go to state management, I have a similar setup where I have a state store component here, which connects to the local Redis container. And this also does the similar thing, if you see. So like you can see, like, so in a state store, you can do like the save operation. You can save multiple objects using the same method by passing different state objects. And you can retrieve a state from the state store using the key. And also you could do bulk retrieval and transactions, plus deleting a key value pair in the state store. So when you run this, so here I am running like, okay. So you could see that it was able to save the two states that we, key value pairs that we have sent to the state store, and it was able to retrieve it and also do the bulk update part using the transactions API. So also it eventually deletes the keys as well. And currently the service invoker API is not working. I'm not sure why. I just had little time to work on the demo, but The idea, I would give you an idea how it would work. So in order to create a service invoker API, like what we do is like similar to the JS again, where we create a Dapr server instance, providing the server port on which the server needs to be started, and what is the Dapr port that we need to connect with. And we are stating the protocol here as gRPC. And this again uses a Dapr client to invoke the method. And the way you register a callback for the invoke service is that, okay, you access the Dapr server and the invoker instance and use the listen method to register a callback for this specific method name. And you can also pass in the callback options where you say like, okay, what type of HTTP method this service is going to be exposed as. And then we have to start the server using the Dapr server.start server method, and then use the, again, client to invoke the method. Unfortunately, this is not running. I'm still not sure why, but the tests are running fine. So I think there is some sort of a decoding issue, or like the response content is not properly serialized there. So I have to check why it is not working. But if you see, like there are different tests that I've already set up for the server API and the client API. So if you see, this is like going to test the server package end to end on the gRPC protocol. And okay, yeah, 1 second. So there are a couple of tests that are already returned for this. I'm skipping 3 test cases where I was thinking that the subscriber would be called or called back again when a retry response is sent back, but that wasn't working. So there are a couple of tests that I've written here, like for example, this only test the publish subscribe mechanism, and then there's a test binding part, and there are tests for the service invocation for all different methods. So you could say like these are working, that means the infrastructure is working, but I have done something, I've done some issues with the demo for the service invoker. So for example, you could switch the protocol to HTTP and the test would still run because there is a separate test file returned for the HTTP protocol. And I'm more or less following the structure of JS-SDK, and soon I will look into the best practices in other SDK and then work on it. But that's more or less I have. And just a short update. Yeah, great. So I think this should start the documentation server as well, just to show that the documentation part is also being worked on. Okay. So already by the way, whatever this is completely running on code space through remote container on VS Code. I think most of you know that, but just if there is someone who doesn't know, I'm just letting you know that. And yeah, so if you see, I can already see like there's a separate link for the Dart, and the idea is to go similar to how Go documentation is running. Just like that, I want to give a separate link for client and server. Some basic documentation is ready, but I got stopped at the publishing the message part because of the issues with the cloud event enveloping. So different methods and different examples are given here. I think, I don't know, in time it will be complete. So yeah, that's more or less I have for today.
Awesome. This is really great to see. So thanks for contributing this. And
Yeah.
I have question for you. Let me share my screen.
Sure.
I see the repo was created in the Dapr organization, but I think we're still, unless I'm missing it, waiting for the code to be pushed.
Yeah, yeah.
So when do we have an ETA when we can expect that?
What I want to do is, like I showed you that the Dapr docs is being worked on. So that is in a separate branch. I want to merge it into the main branch, and then whatever code I have, then I will push it directly to the SDK.
Sounds good. And my understanding is you're the current maintainer, and I'm assuming you're looking for contributors and other people to help contribute to this SDK. So
definitely. I also want to have feedback on like the way I've set it up. So if you have some doubts, we can discuss, and just to be sure, like, okay, I'm in the track.
Sounds good.
But most of the things I've followed how JS SDK is set up, also Go SDK, because I kind of keep both of them as my ground truth. But still, there are some differences in both SDKs. So I have to.
All right. Well, thanks again for showing us.
Thank
today.
you.
If anyone listening in or attending, Dart is your thing, and you want to help contribute. Yeah, welcome to it. So with that, we have just a couple minutes left for our open discussion. So if any questions had come up throughout today's call regarding the topics that we covered, or just anything else that might be top of mind Dapr related, now is the time to ask those questions, and we can have that open discussion. So feel free to put your question in the chat, or if you feel more comfortable, I can ask to be unmuted, and I can unmute you, and you can explain your question to the group.
Okay.
Not seeing anything in the chat. Or yes, looks like we have someone. Like you should be unmuted, Yaron.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Yaron. Hey Abhilash and Stepan.
Hi, Yaron.
Yeah, am I pronouncing your name correctly, Stepan?
Yeah. Hi.
Right, cool. Yeah, so I've talked to both of you before today's call. Thanks for coming on the call. Abhilash, I'll start with you.
Sure.
I'm not really inside of the Dart community, but what I would like to try and do is get more Dart developers, to look at Dapr now that we have an SDK. So like, where do people hang out? Like, do you have a Discord server? You're on Slack? Are there like Dart cons that we can give, maybe like Lightning Dapr talks in? What's your suggestion to bring Dapr to Dart developers?
I think the first thing would be like I have a couple of connections at the Flutter community, but that connects back to the Dart community as well, because Dart alone is not like quite famous, at least I would say. But yeah, there are Discord servers where I could post about this and get some feedbacks. And yeah, I would definitely start with Twitter plus Discord.
Okay, yeah. So, now that Dapr is in CNCF, we actually have some marketing reach that happen. So, and my second question is sort of like on similar vein to Stepan about Knative. So I wasn't here during most of the conversation. I had a meeting prior to that. And so, if I think about Dapr and Knative, I remember there was an issue opened like a year and a half ago by someone from Google on the Knative site asking Knative to support sidecars because it didn't support sidecars. Just when it got launched, you had like a single container in the Knative specification, which is like the equivalent of their pod. And now that it is there, I actually think that the scenarios this unlocks are many. So like my question is, do you know someone in the Knative community, or do you know about that maybe have you participated in the community calls for Knative? And do you think it would be a good idea to maybe even come and show the Dapr Knative integration on the Knative side?
I don't know anyone from Knative. I know about Knative for a couple of years. When it was only starting, also we started it and used it for a couple of POCs, but I don't have any connections with the Knative community. And for the last your question, yeah, I think it will be very good and productive also to go to the Knative community call and also show them that, hey, you can use also Dapr with Knative, and it unlocks a lot of different scenarios. Even for me to prepare the second part, I've gone through a lot of things that Knative can do, and it is like really like a constructor. You can use a lot of capabilities in order to do whatever you want.
Yeah. Okay, great. I actually do know a few people driving Knative in Red Hat, so I might reach out to them, and yeah, hopefully we can create a closer collaboration, because to me, Dapr is a really good complementary tool, where you run your compute on a serverless platform, and then you can run the sidecars there to complement your compute. I think like you said, it opens up a whole bunch of opportunities. Yeah, okay, that's me.
Thanks, Ron. Well, that brings us to time. So I want to thank everyone for attending today's call, and we'll see you the next one on January 11th, 2022. Thank you.
Thank you.